next topic is, how are Americans thinking about what's going on with the Trump administration on DOGE and tariffs and everything else? Two new polls out today, one from CNN, one from some academic school that polls all the time. I can't remember, Quinnipiac or Monmouth or somebody, basically showing the same thing. President's numbers are down a little bit. The floor is not collapsing, but the numbers are down. People don't think he's doing that great a job on the economy. And then there's two issues where elite opinion is slapping me in the face every day. And on one, the whole week, which is on tariffs, and the other is on cuts to medical research. Okay. Here's what elites are saying. And these are on Wall Street. These are universities. Johns Hopkins is firing like 2,000 people because of the cuts in medical research. So here's what people are, and the markets were down. So that's one indice of what some people are thinking. What elites are saying to me is tariff war is a nightmare, losing confidence in the economic team, thinks the president's just out of his mind and too mercurial and inconsistent. And then on the medical research, again, these are Republicans saying, I've got a kid who's got a disease, and this is hard. This is a nightmare. And I know a really qualified scientist who's leaving the government because they're cutting all her funding. This is anecdotal. It's massive. If you had access to my emails and texts, you'd see it's massive. But Robbie, is this a problem that the White House is going to have to address? The tariffs and medical research cuts are just a bridge too far what they're doing.
I would actually split those things in two. I do think the tariffs, they have this immediate effect on the economy in terms of the stock market tanking. I think people do intuitively understand that, like, well, if, the construction materials for building houses cost more, then houses cost more, and so on and so forth. I think that is causing a blowback that could show up in polls pretty fast. The other stuff that Trump is doing in terms of cutting, like medical research or whatever he's cutting, I mean, the polls I've seen, it's funny watching like CNN. Harry Enton does a good job. He'll show the poll, and then the person he's doing the segment with is always shocked that whatever DOGE cut that, the liberal commentator thinks is super unpopular has like 50 or 51 or as high as 54% of people saying that, yeah, we like what DOGE is doing. We think this is mostly fraud, waste, and abuse, not really important stuff. Is it a super majority? No, it's not 80%, but we live in a really closely divided country. So to have, I saw polling that, yeah, these cuts are at 51%. Well, Trump's popular vote, which was impressive, is still like only 48.8%. So rather than people who voted for Trump abandoning him because he's doing this, it's actually people, the numbers would suggest, who maybe didn't vote for Trump, who nevertheless like some of that stuff he's doing. So I would put that in that category. I think that's an area where the elite opinion does not necessarily match what the people think. The tariffs, I think, might be a different matter, where the pain of those are going to be felt quickly, and that will show up in the polling. But that could just be my own personal, I don't like the tariffs and I do like the cuts. So maybe I'm just telling you what I want, want to be the case.
Yeah. Senator.
If the tariff impact of tariffs are that they're put in place and you can identify a measurable increase in price on specific products that people are sensitive to, then I think it can have an impact. I have a slightly different take, though, that what we've seen is the markets drop, not because tariffs have a negative impact on the economy per se, but because the movement back and forth on what's being tariffed and who's being tariffed has created a perspective of uncertainty among market participants, and that demands a higher risk premium. And when you demand a higher risk premium for your investment, your multiple on P/E multiple goes down. So what you're seeing is a reduction in PE multiples across the board, because investors are demanding a higher risk premium, because there's greater uncertainty. Now, for better or for worse, that can all go away in a big hurry. If next week there's some decision on agreement on tariffs for Canada, and they come to some settlement or status quo agreement, do the same in Mexico, then that's going to change quite quickly. But at the moment, I don't see it happening for another few weeks.
All right, thank you for that. Let me say one thing about scientific research. Okay, everybody's against waste, fraud, and abuse. No one would say we need more waste, fraud, and abuse. Then you say, okay, here's a category of cancer research. Okay. And let's say you got a friend whose spouse or kid had that kind of cancer. That person is going to say, I think the federal government should spend as much as possible to try to find a cure for that kind of cancer, right? That's just human nature. The way the media covers this is any dollar cut for a veteran or for cancer research is evil. And that's the way some Americans think about it. And if you are a veteran or if you have a child with that disease, you're going to say, don't cut that. But it's not the case that cancer type X, it's not the case that the taxpayers want to fund unlimited research into that disease. Just not the case, because there's too many things to fund. And you could say that about eradication of disease in Africa. You could say that about education, but we're not going to fund unlimited in anything, even the most sympathetic thing. And I think part of the problem now is you've got these scientists who are very sympathetic saying, I've devoted my life to eradicating X. And we used to spend $6 billion a year on X, and now we're going to spend nothing on X, or we're going to spend eradicating X. We're going to spend 200 million. And
so
and
to be clear, though, just so that your viewers understand what's actually happening, the $800 million in cuts for Johns Hopkins were not NIH cuts.
Correct.
These were cuts in programs that were specially directed to Johns Hopkins for a variety of reasons, some through USAID, some I think through other mechanisms. So at least to date, there have been no cuts to funding for NIH. There was a proposed reduction in the overhead allocation from a negotiated level up around 30, 40, 50%. Down to 15%, but that has been stayed by the courts.
Correct.
So it hasn't got into effect yet. So just so that,
yes, you're absolutely right.
There's a lot of hot talk about cuts to NIH, but there haven't actually been any yet.
Right.
And those that are advocating for the reduction in the overhead reimbursement would argue, maybe correctly or incorrectly, that they're not cutting the grant to the physician or the doctor or the researcher. They're cutting the overhead payment to the institution at which that doctor works. Money's fungible, I get it, but it's an important distinction.
100%. There are some scientists, though, who either have been fired or are quitting, who say they're going because they've been strongly led to believe that these cuts are coming.
Sure, because of especially at Johns Hopkins, because of the 800 million in other funding that was cut, or Columbia.
Yeah,
at least tentatively.
There's them, but I'm talking about people in the government, not at these universities.